Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Grant. I've got James here as well. Say g'day, James.
Morning, everyone.
Thanks for being with us today. We know your time's important, and hopefully we can go through a bit of a topic today, which is something that can help you out in your day-to-day operations with your business. We have got about 30 to 40 minutes here. We have muted everybody in the background as well, but there is a chat area in the back of the application that you can throw some questions our way. If we get time to get to them, then we'll happily deal with that at the end of the presentation. So let's begin. I think we've got a few people here now, so we'll kick off. Right. Firstly, a little message about us. We couldn't go anywhere without doing this, but basically, WildTech has been around for an extensive period of time now. We really are specialists in what I call digital transformations across what we like to term the hands-on industries. You won't necessarily find us at a bank or a building society or an insurance company, but anything like manufacturing, retail, supply chain, professional services, and financials. Not so much financial services, but those key areas, including e-commerce, is where you generally see us. So we do look a lot around not just technology, but process optimization, consolidation of systems which are not talking, and really looking at the end-to-end application flow and information flow across businesses to get the best outcomes for our customers. A little bit about ourselves. So today we are covering off digital transformation and what it is and certainly what it is not. So really three key things that we're looking at here. Particularly the mindset around approaching digital transformation. We hear, and I'm sure you all hear every day in the media, somebody doing something about digital transformation, but very little about what it is and how do you do it well and what is it all about. So we see people start these journeys, but we've also seen them how they go bad. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks around what are the three things that you can do that are generally the most expensive to your business, but they're very avoidable challenges when you address them in the right way. And what's the most effective approach? And really around digital transformation, again, addressing what it is, but also understanding that digital transformation is not just a 3-month implementation of technology. It's actually something that your business should be having as a roadmap that takes it from now into the next sort of 10 years. So that's really how we'll cover off today. Big topic, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions as we move through it. So I think the important thing is, what is digital transformation? Obviously, this is our interpretation, but I think after all these years of doing this sort of stuff, we've got a bit of a lens about the whole thing. And I think importantly, when you talk about it, it's also important to understand what it's not. So digital transformation is not a standalone CRM project or an ERP project. And we see it all the time where organizations want to run at huge pace, quick implementations, get everything done, and then basically rush everybody out the door and get to some sort of value with their particular project. Standalone projects that are running at such great speed that they don't have time to be bedded down and things like that. So they generally fail, and we see it time and time again. What digital transformation is to us is a controlled state of ongoing evolution of smaller projects, smaller iterative projects, which are rolled up into a wider program. That wider program is actually governed at the head of the business. It's not governed by the head of IT. It's not governed by HR. It's not governed by the CFO. It's actually governed by what we like to call the C-level suite or the executives within the organization. Basically own there. It's important to call that out because a lot of these projects we see as well that people, particularly in this market, will leave the business and things like that. By having it stretched across and owned through multiple executives across the top of the business, you actually avoid things like burnout and key man risk. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So how does it all come together? And really, I think I'll spend a bit of time just talking about how I see these things work well and what doesn't work well. But I think planning at the very top of this picture here is actually key. Goes without saying. But understanding what the organization or your business is trying to achieve without thinking about the technology. That's a really important point. too many times we see people rush towards the technology thinking that that will solve a particular issue without actually understanding what problem you're trying to solve or what efficiency you're trying to gain. So understanding where you want to go as an organization and setting that in stone is actually, it sounds so simple, but it happens so often that we don't see that foundational piece put together. It's only then when you actually get sign off and actually spend that time to understand why you're doing this particular transformation program that you'll actually get the result you want. Once you understand that, it's then time to start looking at, well, how am I going to do this from an employee point of view, but importantly, which partners am I going to leverage as part of this business? Again, as I mentioned previously, we see a lot of times where organizations will rush partners in, rush partners out. Causes two problems. One, it's a lot of IP that gets wrapped up and tends to walk in and out of the business, but making sure you choose the right partners, particularly those partners that will actually be the prime contractor and own an outcome. We've seen a lot of projects in the past where companies might come in and do an ERP or a CRM project. They walk out the door, but and things fail. Whereas we will actually see other examples of where an organization is maybe the prime contractor, manage and understand the transformation process and what is the key outcomes for the business, and then deliver those solutions in the best possible way to actually leverage the plan that's been put in place. It again seems like fairly simple, but the reality is a lot of the time when the companies that we see go wrong, they've engaged partners without really rolling them up into the wider plan that's been set. The other
really
thing,
about de-risking,
yeah,
Grant, isn't it? It's really about just de-risking that prime contractor approach. It's, you want to trust someone over that journey and not have to worry about one thing going wrong, because if one thing goes wrong, we've seen it so many times, it can just disrupt the whole journey. Users get disenfranchised with that process, and it's just so key.
Yeah, it's so true, mate. And I think partners that will call it running towards the risk. It's a key outcome. I mean, that's something that we do pride ourselves on. We will take that risk for that outcome. But it's not just us. If you're looking out in the partner community, you really need to be starting to think about those players that will actually de-risk your project for you, not add more risk to your project. And again, we see that a lot of the time. So it's an important point. I think leading into that, then there's actually the technology that you're working with. So again, having once you've chosen your partners, understanding what is your technology that you're implementing here at an architectural level that's got to talk to each other. All these various pieces have to talk. You might have an ERP, a CRM, a HCM product, a planning system, POS systems, e-commerce platforms. All, if you go and choose one by itself, might be the best point solution in market, but if you can't get them to talk to each other, your whole program is in absolute jeopardy of falling apart. Again, there may be scenarios here where you don't go for the biggest, shiniest, best solution. You go for the one that will actually work most effectively with some of your other platforms that you've got to make sure that you get the outcome you're chasing. Again, James, probably your experience would tell that trying to make these things stick together sometimes is the most difficult part of the whole transformation program.
Yeah, it's really about, Grant, looking at what the systems that you're talking about altogether are intended to do, and not try to make something that it's not. We see it all the time with some of our customers coming in, and they want an outcome, and they're trying to engineer a system like an ERP to do everything and do all the heavy lifting for certain things that it's not made to do the heavy lifting for. And what it often results in is a lot of customization that doesn't actually make sense to the bigger picture. So sometimes it actually does make sense to bolt something into that main platform that is doing a lot of the heavy lifting to complement it in the right way. I think that's the key thing. We're looking for complementary elements through this, rather than things that are overcooking what a system really should do.
That's exactly right, mate. It's very, very true. And there's countless examples out there that we could quote around that, but it's important for everybody here to understand it's less about the shiny thing and more about what you're trying to achieve that is important in these particular programs. And I think the last point in that particular slide, but something I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about, is your employees within your organization. If you think about these transformation programs, the people that are actually at the ground level, they're at the coalface, and they're living in this new world, they're actually the most important as part of the the driving force with the new change that's coming in to make things happen. Customers are absolutely your number one stakeholder in terms of that. But if your employees aren't on board, then the whole thing falls apart very quickly. So we do spend a lot of time understanding how employees can engage effectively with the new change that's coming along. We often call it the permafrost. It's interesting. You might have a board or a group of C-level executives who will set this particular vision, rush to go get partners in, forget about the employees, and then the employees basically say, I'm not going to do it. Or I may not say that I'm actively going to do it, but actually we'll start to work in the old world, and things become very, very difficult. So that permafrost is important. You've got to be thinking all the time when you're running these organizations, how do I make sure that the change sticks? How do I make sure the message is heard? How do I make sure that the transition happens? It's always a bit of pain. Change is difficult, but how do I do it in the most efficient manner? And I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that now. So I've talked about the employees. It really is that end user adoption that we need to bridge the whole time. And it's all about what happens once you bring in this new technology. But what we find is the people who will talk about change management and focus in on it, but they don't actually really understand what the change management mindset needs to be. Change management is not just training. I can't say it more than, I'll talk to them, I'm blue in the face about this. Change management is focused on 4 key areas. We have our own methodology that we built out over the years. It's called 246. And again, if anybody wants information about the change programs that we run, at the end of the presentation, more than happy to have share some information around that. But the things that I like to concentrate on are in 4 areas. The first one is sponsorship. The second one is training needs analysis. The third is communication and 2-way communication. And the final one is organization impact. They are 4 separate streams, but they are all interconnected. You cannot do one without the other. Otherwise you have failure. But when we talk about sponsorship is around that. Who are the key sponsors within the program that are visibly and actively and effectively pushing the particular program and communicating why this particular transitional transformation is happening? If you don't have effective sponsorship, if the C level is quiet and you're leaving it to the IT team to come up with the reasons why, again, we see it so many times that when the change is required or a new world is coming on board, if that sponsorship is not enforcing that change, you basically, one of 2 things happen. People either don't operate in the new world or they leave the business and you've got to start again. So sponsorship and being very visible is so key about the whole thing. The training needs analysis is important as well, because sometimes we see it a lot in some industries like manufacturing, where there are very, very disparate skill sets within your organization. Not everybody can use the platforms in a particular way. Some people, are scared of using a mouse. I've seen that a few times in training programs as well. So the training needs analysis is actually going to that level of going, right, what are the people doing in the new world, and how do we train them effectively so that they can actually absorb and adopt to the new way of doing things? If you don't do that particular piece of work and you just do a generic training program or even train the trainer, you're fraught with a bit of danger there in terms of what will actually happen. People forget, people want to go back to the old way. So really understanding and tailoring that training to the organization is really important. Communication, I put there, it's communication is around 2-way communication, giving people the opportunity to ask questions. Not just a newsletter, not just a where are we in the project, it's actually providing that ability to go, what's in this for me? What are the changes going to be? Are things like my job going to be changed? Do I have a job at the end of this particular program? All those things, believe it or not, we see time and time again that people don't get that opportunity, and then they start feeling, if they don't have the information, they'll fill it with their own thoughts. In which case, then you end up in a situation where people, again, leave the business or move on or just actively wide out the program. So it's a very, very important thing to take into account. Final one's org impact. It's a bit of an obvious one that you see out there, but it's so often the one that's missed is what is actually going to happen to the business? What is going to happen to the people? Do you need more people in the organization? Do you need less? And in which case, how does all that sort of roll up into, again, things like your sponsorship program, into your communication programs, and I think you can see there that they're all intertwined. The org impact is intertwined into your messaging. The sponsorship is intertwined into your communication. Your training needs analysis is intertwined with the org impact. They all are connected, and if you don't think of it in that particular manner, you run into trouble, because so many times you get conflicting messages, for example, around the fact that people might be losing their jobs as part of the program, and the sponsor goes, no, they're not. Then somebody will invariably go, well, there might be something. And all of a sudden you start losing direction and momentum because you're conflicted about what you're actually trying to communicate to your business. So it's important that a change management program is encompassing not just training, but these 4 areas. And again, there's actually a lot more to this than just these 4 areas. But addressing it as an interconnected living being as part of the program is really important to do. So, Jimmy, any questions? Anything about that?
Yeah. Just, I think it's sometimes what we find, it is a bit of an uncomfortable thing to address in the business, because you do have to go down to the individual employee who might not normally be considered as part of what you're achieving if you're just adopting one little system change here or there. You actually need to go right down to that person who might be a problem during the project, and make plans and strategies around how you're going to handle that person. Because if they're the person you can flip across to embracing the change, they're going to be your best advocate all the way through. So a lot of the time it's about making a plan around how you're going to attack some of the difficult decisions early, connecting everything together, so that that person who might be the problem child, if you like, within the change that you're trying to achieve, it becomes your best advocate. And we've seen it go both ways, where businesses haven't been prepared to adopt the change at that level, and go right down to that individual, and that results in problems, and others that have, and it's been a really great success. So it's just sometimes a little bit of it's a big step to take, because you have to make some tough decisions with the plan. It's not just a plan, you actually have to really implement it.
Yep, that's so true. And I think that comment about who's the noisiest or the squeakiest wheel in the business, so often we see them try to be buried in a project, and it never works. They actually have to be addressed first up. It's harder work, but once you get them on side, they're actually, if that person's on side 99 times out of 100, the rest of the business will line up behind them. It's a really interesting thing. But unfortunately, when we see these change programs happen, a lot of the time they're pushed aside because they're not going to toe the line, or they're going to pollute the message rather than be on board. So best to deal with it up front and really make sure that you take them into account. Okay, right. So I think this is a really important part, and we'll hand over to James after this slide here to just talk a little bit more about it. But we talk about it, is your business or organisation ready to run? And that is, I talk about before organisations doing quick 3-month implementations and then getting people out. That's not running. That's actually just giving yourself an uppercut a lot of the time and causing more problems than anything else. Learning to run is actually the marathon. It's actually the long journey that you're going to be taking as part of this whole thing. But there's 3 key things that I think you need to focus on in this to keep your business on track when you are doing these particular digital transformations. The first one's really the distraction phenomenon. And I've been in the game for a long time. Geez, I think nearly 30 years. And the number one thing I see where people go wrong is where in the transformation program, people chase the technology without understanding what is the actual process change or the transformation they're trying to achieve. I'm seeing it with AI. It's the coin the phrase. It's solutions looking for problems. So I love the fact that 10 years ago we were talking about big data. It's actually more than that, but big data, Internet of Things, all these platforms and whatnot all came out 10 years ago. The reality is we're only really starting to use them now in the way that they were designed. AI is another one where there's a hiss and a roar, everyone's chasing it. At the end of the day, if it's not ready or you can't actually implement or see why you're going to implement particular pieces of AI to come up with an outcome, then avoid the FOMO, don't chase the dream, just wait till you actually really can construct the business case and the reasons why that you're going down this path. Otherwise, you'll end up in a mess. So that's one of the key things, and I'll again let James talk to that a bit more. I think the other thing is around the gaps in understanding around digital transformation. I think I've spoke at length about people wanting to do really fast, short implementations and get it done and move on. It's actually not the way things need to be looked at. You actually need to sort of challenge your business to be comfortable in things like multiple go lives. You need to be able to say, okay, well, there might be 6 or 7 go lives that we have, and people get a little bit tired of that. But amazingly, when you see them, you do a little one first, and maybe a slightly bigger one next, and then the major ones as time goes on. People they get match fit. Your business actually becomes match fit for the actual transformation program. So it's really interesting watching businesses who really get into that and understand what these transformation programs are about. The ones that don't get it, they end up in trouble. And I think the final point there is around the adoption side of things. And I've talked a little bit about that in terms of you can go out now, and we see this a lot, you can go out now and buy a Salesforce license with your credit card. You can go out and buy a Microsoft product with your credit card. You can go out and buy an Oracle product with your credit card. And you get this creeping technology landscape that happens by default because people start using it without actually understanding what is the major point of the transformation program. So you end up with platforms and solutions with this technology creep, which is really becomes very expensive, uncomfortable as they bed in. So not having that structure around the programs of work that you're trying to do and that haphazard adoption, including then looking at things like integration, become a real problem. So I'm going to stop talking for a while. I'm going to let James talk a bit more about this in detail, but they're the 3 things really that we focus in to make sure that you guys or any business that we work with is ready to run and not just flounder in terms of some of these technology projects. So over to you, James.
Cheers. Yeah, I think also as well, and to add into these points that we're going to cover off on, we've released a white paper and put out an article detailing a few more points that are really relevant to digital transformation. The reality of it is that we're talking about a bit of a beast, and there's a reason it's so difficult to achieve for organizations, because there's so many different moving parts and challenges that you have to attack to sort of achieve your transformation goals. So we focused in on the 3 challenges here because we think they're quite intertwined to the overall message at a higher level of what you have to sort of start out doing from a conversational view to move forward in the first instance and have the right mindset all the way through. I think when we talk to the distraction phenomenon, as Grant mentioned, it's just the idea that you've got a new piece of shiny technology that's out there that you can purchase with your credit card. You can easily go and purchase that and think about what it's going to solve within your business. But you might not realize that the features and offerings in that product might not be able to be used alongside the rest of your system architecture because the system's designed on a platform that won't integrate well with your existing platforms that you're playing with. So we see that quite a lot. A business will go ahead and in a CRM space, we'll purchase a CRM tool off the shelf, not realizing that CRM tool won't connect up to the ERP system or the system they've got that controls all of their lead gen and management and so on from that end. So you have a sales team running on one platform and then an operational team who have to manually key in orders afterwards, and it creates actually a big problem within that business. So it's really important when you think about the distraction phenomenon to think about how the emerging technologies that you're dealing in, and generative AI is a great tool. It's easy to get an answer right now. You can type something in online and have a response back in 5 seconds. But you really have to think about how a tool like that is built in terms of its infrastructure and what strategy it is around what you're using it for to make sure you're not wasting your money by just using that tool. So really need to be focused on not being swayed by the sort of allure of the new technology. That new shiny thing will have a purpose, but you've got to think about that new shiny thing holistically within your business because you're going to run into problems. Grant, we see it all the time, mate, with companies who come in, they've got 15 different systems all trying to do different things. A lot of the time, one system is doing the same thing as another, and they don't even realize it because they didn't buy it for that purpose, but that tool's got another function at the back end.
Yeah, look, it's such a strong point, and I think not picking on AI, but I will for 2 seconds. When ChatGPT first came out, there was, oh my God, all lawyers are gone and accountants are gone and everything else, and it's been really interesting talking to my friends in the legal community and asking them the questions. Are they worried about ChatGPT as it currently stands. And the general consensus is, well, we were at the start, but then when we've realized that a lot of the people who are writing contracts are writing information or their contracts on legislation that's already obsolete or old, because ChatGPT only had the information loaded to 2021. We're very excited, and because we know that when these cases come up, or if there is any contract disputes, the contracts that have been written with ChatGPT are actually going to be incorrect. So it's again, people who are rushing to the shiny thing, like you said, James. It will come, the time will be right, but let's avoid the glitz and the glamour of the whole thing, and just make sure it's fit for purpose. If it's not fit for purpose, stick to your guns, understand what you're trying to do as a transformation program, and make sure the technology aligns and gives you what you need, not the other way around. And you end up chasing and driving technology solutions which are actually detrimental to your business. So that's my way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate. And you just have to, I think as well, we sometimes, when you talk to just dollars involved, if something is cheaper and it's going to provide an easy win, it's easier to get it past the board. It's easier to get it past the C-level exec. And what it sort of leads into is the next point. And the points we'll talk about in gaps in understanding and then haphazard adoption really are all intertwined to everything we've been discussing so far. So when we talk to the gap in understanding, it's basically not realizing what you're trying to achieve out of bringing in a new system or a suite of systems altogether. So a good example is, we're going to put in a range of systems, but we're not going to adopt a change management plan about how they're all going to come together. We're going to hire a CTO or someone who might have done something like this before, rely on them to make all the decisions, and then we don't have to be involved in the process. Good example there, the executive, the sponsors are not involved. And then what ends up happening is that new person who's come in can offside a lot of the people because they're not actually part of the business. They haven't been part of that growth that you've probably gone through as a business. And then you end up in a scenario where people are disenfranchised, and the system and settings will fall down, not because that person hasn't got it all set up in the right way in terms of integration and different platforms that play together, but there's been a gap in understanding from the change element that's involved, because it's not actually aligned to the organizational goals that you're essentially trying to achieve. So the end result of having a gap in understanding sometimes is you miss a lot of opportunities because you actually create inefficiencies in the background, and you're not really harnessing what digital transformation can do. And Grant, I think about that match fit example like you spoke about. If it's done correctly and you understand the idea of quick go lives and getting things done in segments, you're going to be able to train your team better, and you're going to be able to make sure you structure it in the right way. That level of understanding of something like that's really important. If you go about approach of not taking that sort of staggered way through, you're going to run into problems as well. So the gaps in understanding, I guess, really leads into haphazard adoption. Do you have any thoughts, Grant, around the gaps in understanding? I think we've gone through a lot of it so far. It really is intertwined to a lot of the things.
It's all connected. It's all connected. But I think it's a really interesting point, and to, again, just being a little bit counterintuitive, that a lot of the times when you start these transformation programs, people start to do things in a way to avoid the go lives. It's like it's this big rush up to the go live, and then everybody sort of loses their brain for a couple of weeks, and then the system kind of beds in, and then there's potentially a lot of issues there and whatnot with these big bang approaches that happen. The businesses that succeed are the ones that really embrace that concept of being, okay, we're going to have multiple go lives. There are, there's going to be this uncomfortable feeling and a little bit of anxiety around each one. But I tell you now, the ones that do it right, and maybe you pick a small hurdle to jump over first, something that you know is going to work. But the confidence you get by going through a go live and then saying, right, okay, we're now going to continue on with our next stage of the journey. The business grows. You see people, patting themselves on the back. It's a huge kudos to the business when they go through these changes. The reality is, when you're talking digital transformation, some of them go for years, and you might have periods of downtimes. But the reality is, if you stagger each of the go lives or each of the projects, you just get match fit, and you shouldn't be scared of that. And that's probably the single biggest thing I see businesses shy away from is that idea of, yes, I'm going to go live, yes, I'm going to disrupt my business, but I'm okay with that. So yeah, that's one of the key things there.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Yep.
So this one's quite self-explanatory. I think it's probably the easiest point to sort of understand at a high level. You go and bring in a new system and you go and say, okay, we're going to put this into our architecture, and you don't think about the bigger picture. What you create is an absolute web of systems that don't necessarily talk together in the right way or don't talk at all. Now that creates a lot of problems in your industry or sort of your business, because you're going to have people doing a lot of double entry. You're going to have people doing a lot of things that actually take them away from what they're really good at in their day-to-day job, because they're spending all their time piecing together systems that are not meant to talk together. And I think that's a really important point. You're essentially creating barriers because the systems that you're trying to put in, because you haven't thought about it holistically, are not actually meant to talk together in the way that you're intending them to. You're just hoping for a gold standard outcome without thinking about the process behind how that outcome should be achieved. So what's really important is when you're thinking about digital transformation, you're taking a holistic viewpoint of all the systems that are involved. And the next set of slides that we talk about will really hone in on the point of haphazard adoption and how you can avoid that. Because if you do acquire disparate systems, a good example, HR POS not connecting in to payroll correctly, or POS not connecting into inventory and warehouse management, you're not going to have a seamless sort of picture, which will mean people will have to do more in the background to piece that together. And that's just going to impact all your efficiencies that you're trying to achieve. So when we attack the haphazard adoption approach and some of the other areas, what we tend to do, and Grant, I'll get you to go to the next slide, we really focus in on looking at the holistic approach and landscape together. So this diagram on the left I really like, because it gives you a picture, and it's typically a diagram of an ERP system, which tends to be at the core of what you're trying to achieve from a digital transformation project, in the sense of it's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting as the source of truth for your inventory data, for a lot of your financials, the key information that drives a lot of your reporting and back-end requirements. But what it sort of highlights is that one system, if we take the example of an ERP or a successful system implementation, is going to do a lot of things. It's going to have requirements that's going to tie together CRM, inventory management, commerce, marketing, and so on. But that system itself might not do everything it's supposed to do. So what you have to do when you consider what the business needs is look to the systems that are going to achieve all of the needs that you have. And that might be multiple. And a lot of the times we're dealing with companies who require, if it's a discount retailer or online retailer, they probably need 6 or 7 different systems talking together to achieve their goals all together. Now, the only way that works, though, is if you look behind the big circle and look behind all the different areas that require the business to be successful, and you think about the hardware and software that's actually essentially behind the products. You think about the infrastructure behind the products and the architecture, because you need to make sure all these systems have the right security metrics in place, and you're not going to compromise the business by bringing one system in compared to another. You need to look at how it's all stored together, because you quickly bulk together 6 systems, and if you're using a middleware platform like a service bus, it's going to potentially be very expensive. Other times customers have their own data warehouses that are also expensive. So what you essentially need to do at a high level is look to all of the systems that you're essentially trying to bring in, understand where they all fit within the bigger picture of the business. So that diagram on the left-hand side, what systems fit in where, and do they make sense in terms of where they fit? Last thing, are they actually set up in the right way to talk together? And that's where the picture on the right-hand side comes in together really well. Grant, I know you're really passionate about this sort of slide as well. There's a lot behind it, and then we can talk to it for hours, but it's a really important one when it comes to tying everything together.
Yeah, look, it's such a great slide, and I think my only commentary is I'm hoping people will think in the same way I am. But I think a few years ago, before cloud, the thing that we saw when we do these implementations or these transformation programs was Excel actually fills the gap of everything. So there's a new spreadsheet, there's a new report, it's all Excel based, and businesses were sort of, okay, I've got these platforms, and where I had gaps, we put in Excel, and then we'll try and make it work. And hopefully even people start trying to get Excel to talk directly to databases, and off we go. We're seeing a real shift, and the shift is because you can procure these point solution platforms with a credit card. You can see people go and buy a new platform, and then all of a sudden by default it becomes your CRM platform or your HR platform. you haven't gone through any process. Somebody's just taken the initiative sometimes, and some people just get the grumps and then decide to go, well, I can't get what I want. I'll literally go and expense this for a couple of dollars each month. And that's my new point solution. Could be around CRM, it could be around support, it could be around e-commerce even. So they're the situations now that we're seeing less of that Excel model and more of the outcome is still the same. We've got to take a holistic approach, but yeah, the ways things are happening these days are very different. So, but it's we could go on for hours about this. So I think we better just keep going with the time constraints we've got. So there we go, Jimmy. Off to the next one.
Yeah, and sort of the last couple of slides here before we dive into a bit of Q&A and some of the questions that we've got through is really around the mindset you can have going into all of this thing, these scenarios we've been talking about. I think you have to be really open-minded and you have to have that growth mindset when you're thinking about transformation. You can't come into the scenario thinking that you know everything in the business and you know exactly what you need at a high level. You need to listen to people who are going to tell you different ways and thinkings around how you might improve a certain system. You need to be able to be prepared to listen to your team as well. So you have to be prepared to listen to what their challenges are and what their recommendations are. And you can't have that fixed mindset that derails all of the scenarios we've been talking through. So when we tie this all together, the challenges that we sort of spoke about really tailor into someone who's got a fixed mindset to an approach to digital transformation. It's essentially the starting point for where all the problems sort of begin. If someone's got a fixed mindset, they will adopt a system in the wrong way. They have the gap in an understanding around how it needs to be achieved, and they're really not thinking about the bigger goals, and they're distracted by it. The person who's got that growth mindset, who's willing to listen, think about the bigger picture, will hear all of the elements and then make the right decision. And that's really what digital transformation is about. It starts as a conversation. You can't dive into the technology straight away necessarily. And when we go into businesses and attack digital transformation, you'll find if you end up working with us that we will just talk high level to what the business is trying to achieve at the start and where your challenges are going forward. And then we'll look at tailoring systems around your problems, because we need to think about everything that's involved in your business, and you do as well, before you start making critical decisions in the background. And that's really tailored into your growth mindset, because transformation is not about a quick win in a month or 2 months. It's really about potentially 12 to 24 months of continuous improvement and that sort of match fitness that Grant's been talking about, that enables your business to grow as the systems grow around you as well. So you've got to be really prepared to think open-minded. I know that's sometimes a bit hard for executives who potentially have an idea of where you want to get to, but not necessarily the means in between. You might have an idea how you're going to get there as well. But yeah, you've really got to be prepared to listen in and think about this holistically, because if you're not prepared to do that, you'll encounter a lot of the challenges we mentioned before.
Yep, that's very true, mate. Very true. I think even then, it's difficult to say sometimes, but when you run into people who have a fixed mindset and you're within your business, nothing makes a bigger statement than potentially moving those people on. It's not what you want to do, and it's certainly people that everyone has the ability to change, but if it's proving entirely so difficult that you can't get the open growth mindset embedded in the business, then potentially moving those people onto to another organization makes a lot of sense, and we see it a lot. That it does help. It's uncomfortable, but that's what change does. Sometimes we have to live with that sort of thing to get the right outcome.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So, in terms of, I'll quickly skip through the next couple of slides, conscious of our time and everyone on the call. But essentially what we've done is we've placed a couple of scenarios in around some key departments in a business, and where you might start in day one compared to where you end up at the end of day 365, or however long your digital transformation journey takes. It's really important to map out these scenarios to understand the value of your employees and what work they're currently doing and what they could be doing in the future. So this is actually a couple of our real examples that we've handled. We've obviously omitted out all of the names and stuff in between, but from a finance, procurement and sales team, we have a day zero picture where a lot of the processes are manual for companies. There's a lot of double handling of information that's required across all the teams. Decision making is really difficult. And then we have a day 365 picture in the next slide, Grant, that we skip to, where we talk about what the change has actually meant for those employees. And it essentially stems around allowing your employees to do the job that they were hired to do. That the employees really hired to be an expert in merchandise planning, if we're talking retail. What they're doing is piecing together information because they've got no real-time stock visibility because the POS is not connected up to the inventory management system. By connecting those two up together, you're essentially enabling that employee to do their job and make the right decisions in the procurement area that they need to. So it's just a good example of visualization. The slide deck and the recording will be sent out for you to digest a bit more following this meeting. But in the interest of time, I think, Grant, we go to the next slide and get some of the Q&A questions that we need to.
Yep, perfect. The last bit there, mate, do you want to just quickly talk with, a little bit of self-promotion here?
Yeah, so obviously we've got a wider team, and the people you're seeing up on the slide here are key pillars in each of our divisions that we sort of talk about. So from Grant at the top and myself from general manager side, we then have our sales guys and team in Louis and Carl, who really drive and spearhead a lot of the process and work with you to understand your needs at the start, right down to our heads of department, in particular Jesse and Dave, who are really passionate about what we talk about and drive the adoption and delivery all the way through. I guess the key thing with WildTech, you're dealing with one team all the way through. It's not like you have a sales guy who you never see again all the way through the process, really passionate about tying this whole thing together and working as a team, which is why we put our faces to the website, even though they are a bit ugly.
At least the black and white gets rid of some of the grey for me. But I think one last point on this is that the team here that you see on this side, there's obviously a much wider team that's as part of this business. But we're in the corner of working with our customers, and we do tend to go against the grain of what some of the technology providers have to say. So some of them are out there sort of saying, look, you need to just adopt everything we say you're going to adopt. We've got 30,000 customers. There's nothing we haven't seen before, and that's the way you should go about things. We take a very different approach, which is actually your business exists, your organization exists because of some very specific IP that's made you successful. Let's make sure that any of these transformation programs, we ignore the technology in the first instance because we want to make sure we not only preserve that IP that you've got, but we also enhance it to make sure that you're competitive in market and you continue to grow at the pace that you are. So very different way of thinking about things than some of the technology providers out there. Okay, we are running short on time, so I'm going to dive into some questions now. James, you got a couple there that you want to...
Yeah, we do. And a couple off the back of our recent white paper that we released, that's all over our LinkedIn pages.
Yep.
Basically, the first question, I guess, mate, it's always starts off, and it's an obvious one, is where do you start with the journey? Where do we go? How do we get moving?
Yeah, it's such a good question because it's really got to start. It's always at the top of the slide. It's always at the top of the chain, and it's really around working with the board or the executive team within the business to really understand. I call it true north, which is where we're going. We're going to embark on a bit of a journey here, more than a bit of a journey. It's a massive program of change. We are going to disrupt the business, but we have to look forward to that and be brave about that. But we need to understand where we're headed with this thing. So understanding that true north, getting it across the multiple executives. I call it, you can even call it the project steering committee or project board, but it's effectively the executives within the business all aligning behind the plan of what the transformation program is going to look like. There is no point going out to market, in my opinion, going out to market and looking for what's out there before you actually do this. Because again, if you start chipping around, looking at things, then you end up in a situation where you start chasing the shiny thing, and that's the worst outcome that we see happens out there. Again, let's look for what the solution is. Make sure that we understand the problems first. We don't want to have a thing where we've got technology solutions looking for a problem. It's the other way around. We want to understand the problem. We want to make sure that the program aligns with that problem, and then we build the solutions accordingly. That starts at the top, very first thing. That could take a while. It can take 3-4 months to just get everybody aligned, but that's the way it's got to be adopted if you want a successful outcome.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate.
Yeah.
This thing is not we're not looking for a short win with this. It's going to
No.
take time and energy. It's all the way through. It's
Yeah.
something that's a bit difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
We actually, a question that came through from the audience that we've got on the call around sponsorship. So when we talk about sponsorship, the question is, when we talk about sponsorship, do you mean decision makers that decide on and controls funding? And I guess the answer to that is absolutely. The people you're talking at a sponsorship level need to be the people who can deal with the end difficult decision if it needs to be made. So that trigger point. What are we going to do in this scenario if we need to dive into funding this thing? What do we need to do if we have an employee who is not coming along for the ride and is someone we have to think about and manage out of this process? The person who can make the ultimate decision has to be this person who's driving the sponsorship lens. They sit back from the project. They're not the person who is involved in the day-to-day decision-making around the project. A lot of decisions are made. They're the person who's at the steerco. They're the person who's sitting there, hearing the high-level progress and making decisions at that end point as that ultimate authority. Now, typically sponsorship involves sponsorship from the implementation side as well. So not just your business's team. You need to be working alongside a sponsor on the Wild Tech team, as an example, together to make the decisions that are required.
Yeah. It's such a good point. And I think there's one last thing around sponsorship. You always have an executive sponsor, generally the CEO, maybe the CFO, depending on what's going on. But you can also have sponsors that will step into the project because that's the particular phase you're working on at that point in time. So maybe a director of HR might step in and be a co-sponsor of the project while things are happening, because that's the area of most focus. They may, as that goes live with the particular solution, they may check out. The executive sponsor always stays the same, but then you might actually have someone else step into the breach to be the sponsor as the next phases come along. I've seen that work very effectively. It can get confusing for people. Sometimes it's just easier one sponsor, one program, but for the larger programs, sometimes it's also important to have never more than two. That's my key counsel, but certainly those sponsors are being able to be flexible with that is also something that I've seen work very well.
Yeah, that's it, mate. There's a couple of quick questions we can rattle through.
We are over. Yep.
And we might just quickly get through them. The other question we've got is, in tight labour markets, how do we ensure projects can deal with key person risk? I mean, we all experience that. We all know that.
Oh my
gosh,
all the time.
Yeah.
Look, and it's no shock to anybody on this call. The market's tight. People change. People shift. People leave. And really making it bigger than that one person is so important. Typically what I see happens if you don't stretch this out across multiple resources and multiple sponsors or the exec team, for example, and somebody does leave, you meander into a technology project very quickly. And it's then a race to how quickly can we get this live and how the hell do we just shut this off and get on with life, because this is now hurting us and we don't know why we've actually started this journey. So again, conscious of time and quickly answering it, but you again, it's so important to make sure that the program of change is understood across the business so that you're not exposed to that key person risk.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We're all experiencing it.
We see it a lot.
The bane of our existence in the last 12 months. Absolutely on all end.
Yeah.
I think the last one we've got, mate, just quickly in the interest of time. So I'm halfway through a project and a new technology comes along, like we're talking about, like ChatGPT, and basically technology people want to start including it into the tech stack. Jump ahead. How do we handle the person who says, hey, this is going to help us all the way through?
Yeah, look, again, it comes back to understanding that original thought process around what's your true north, why are we doing this? A lot of the time it could be worth staying with the older technology for the fact that it's going to address the problems that you're experiencing or the efficiencies you're trying to gain within your business. If chasing the dream or chasing the firefly or whatever can distract the business and end up into one of those very expensive pitfalls where the new shiny thing becomes the crux of the project and everything gets lost. So always ground yourself back into the plan, why we're doing it. Forget the technology as much as you can. Look, sure, have a look at what's out there sometimes, but your program is designed to be delivered good programs are designed to be delivered in a particular manner, in a particular way to get your outcome that you need. So staying the course and making sure you've got that in mind is just so important. Otherwise you'll get lost. Okay.
Just conscious, Grant, we got one more question from the audience that's come through. So quickly, you can probably answer that one. It's good we're getting a few of these questions through at the end. We probably need more time for Q&A next time. We just talk too much. So how much planning should we do internally before reaching out to someone like you? I can answer this one. I think the reality of it is that there's no perfect time to reach out. Like from our end, we're not fussed if you're starting out on the journey or if you're 3 months down the line of planning and talking through it yourselves. We are interested in the long game with you because we're taking on a big project with you all the way through. So when we think about coming to us and talking through, if it's just a conversation, and that's fine. You can come to us right at the start of your journey and we can work with you right until the point you're at the scenario of actually committing to doing something, where we know these projects require a lot of thought and external thinking before they can happen. And we're not the type of company to sit back and say, you're in a planning phase, we're not going to talk to you. We will be willing to talk to you all the way through and guide you through the journey. We know that the scenario you want to hit at the end of the day is a project. And if it doesn't eventuate, it's because there's something else happening. And we're happy to take that risk, I suppose, of that occurring because you're going through a learning process yourself, and we're willing to transpose our knowledge to you and your business as well as our own, because we learn a lot as well, learning about your business and what you're trying to do as well. So it's good for us on both ends.
Yeah, perfect. Sooner the better in my mind. James, to your point, mate, we're not going to lose sleep about having early conversations. I think it all helps with that. But if you're 3 months down the journey and you want some advice, I'm happy to pitch in as well. Again, we're that type of business that likes to look at the risk and help it out rather than run away from it the other direction. So we are 6 minutes over. So for those that have stayed on, thank you so much. We really do hope that you've got something out of today. We are more than happy to leap in, have detailed conversations around anything that we highlighted, change management, the planning side, any of the key things that you have when you get these digital transformations off the ground and starting to get them into reality. So please reach out and we can go from there. Again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.